I know we're in Romans, but I want to show you something in the book of Job. In Job chapter 9, verse 9, check this out. 9 7, I'm sorry. It says, who commands the sun and it does not rise? Who seals up the stars? Who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea? Next verse. Look at this. Who made the bear and the Orion, the Pleiades and the chambers of the south? Stop there. You can go back, put the logo back. The book of Job is the oldest known biblical book we have. They say it possibly dates back as far as 7,000 years before Jesus. This predates Moses. They say that it could possibly be 5,000 years before. That's still a long time before. And what Job is saying is that God established the stars, and he mentions specific constellations. So it's interesting. This is in the Bible. So this is why I say astronomy is a study of stars. Astrology is something else. Okay. The Bible mentions these three things, but I want to talk about two of these. The Orion, I'm sorry. So this is interesting because the Bible mentions it. You know what's crazy about it is the fact that this is how people knew the seasons. This is how people knew. Like, for instance, if you were born on a certain day back then, you didn't have a calendar to write it on. So you would look at the stars, and then when you saw that constellation again a year later, you would say, oh, I must be one, I must be two, I must be three. And they would keep seasons this way. It's a cluster of hundreds of stars. This is what's crazy about it. It's mentioned in the book of Job. What's a trip to me is the fact that you got to remember, stars are really far apart from each other because a star is a sun, right? Each star is a sun. They're so far away that it's just a little twinkling star. But in actuality, a lot of those stars are bigger than our sun. And they are so far away from each other. So Pleiades is this group of stars that has stuck together. They stuck together and they move in the same way, the same direction, the same speed. How can that be? Unless someone commanded them to. You know what I'm saying? This is crazy. It would be like, and if I say, throw a football that way, and I'll throw a football that way, and they're going to go in perfect speed for the next 1,000 few years. And God did that with stars, hundreds, and said, all of you stay in one place. Do you know the ordinances of he's asking Job, he's saying, Job, do you know the ordinances of the heavens? You know how like when you have a GPS ordinance? He's saying, do you have the ordinance of the heavens? Can you establish their rule in the earth? Look what he says in the next verse. Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season, or can you guide the bear with its children? The next one. Look at this. 30, yeah. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Remember, they're held together. They don't go apart. Thousands of years, they're still there in the sky right now. And God is telling Job, can you bind them together? Because I did. And the Lord's like, you can't even throw two footballs and keep them together at the same speed. I do this with stars. Or loose the cords of Orion. That's a trip, right? So guys, there's nothing wrong with talking about the stars. So why am I bringing all this up in the middle of Romans? This is very important. So thousands of years ago, they noticed that the same constellations keep circling. And ultimately there's 12 of them, and then it starts all over in another year. Anybody recognize those? Well, you call them horoscopes, but they're not. It's a zodiac. Horoscopes are something different. Because then here's the problem. This is why I'm talking about this. This is what Paul is talking about in Romans. Because God gave us those to show us the seasons. Not to worship them. Not to look to them for direction. Not to say, oh, I'm this or I'm that, or this is my lucky number, or this is that, or whatever. He says, I gave that in my glory. I named those. I gave you the 12 seasons. One's a Taurus, one's like a bull, one's different things. But see, as Christians, we freak out on that stuff. But the fact is, there's a difference between studying the stars that God made and worshiping the stars. This is how they told time. This is how they knew the history. This is how they knew seasons. This is how they knew months. This is how they knew when you were born. They would look, because each month that passes, the constellation would be in front of the sun. And then the next month, the next constellation would be in front of the sun. And the next month, the next one would be in front of the sun. So they would know and they would remember. Now keep that in mind. Now let's read Romans again and look what it says. Let's start in verse 21. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. They claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, resembling men and birds and animals and creeping things. He's like, you have now created gods out of this. But in actuality, he says, you exchange the glory of God. Because God put those stars, and instead of saying, man, Lord, glory to you who created this for our seasons, instead people started to worship them. And then they started making statues of them.